Hello, everybody. Welcome along to another webinar. We have Jeff Lackey today. I'm so excited to have another podcast webinar host because
Mhm.
you always get great ideas from your guests and a lot of insight to share. And I'm excited that Jeff's going to share his insight with you all. I'd like first, Jeff, for you to introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll start talking about our title of webinar, which is the 5 pillars of people management. So, Jeff, let us know a little bit more about yourself.
Sure thing. So back in 1971, a little baby. No, just joking. so no, I come from an interesting background. I'm one of the rare individuals that you might meet that actually was born in the Philippines, studied Swahili as my language. My major was industrial organizational psychology. I've had the privilege of being able to work with large organizations. I started out as a poor farm kid and grew up to work in large corporations. So much so that I've had the privilege of leading teams to hire over 1 million people in over 70 countries across 8 different business sectors. So it's been a remarkable ride. I've been instituted hundreds of technologies and capabilities, all the way from building my own ATS whenever I was in the late 90s, actually mid 90s, all the way up to implementing some AI capabilities within a Fortune 4 organization. So it's been a remarkable ride, and I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing people, including getting to know you, Adam, and really appreciate having me on your show.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. You bring a wealth of experience, and a little baby was born in 1997. It's me, and I think you'd accomplished a lot by the time I was born. So it's great to learn from you. Could you
That was
tell
the
everyone a
same
little bit more
year
about
my
your?
son was born. That's
Oh,
funny.
was it?
That's
Okay,
exactly, yeah.
let's get him on. Could you tell us a little bit more about your podcast, growing your business with people?
Sure. So December 13th of last year, I launched a podcast. David Casey, a good friend of mine, was my first guest. He's now the uh, global diversity chief diversity officer, social impact officer for Tapestry, and they own things like Coach brands and Kate Spade, and they're actually branching. They've just acquired some other luxury brands and high growth. He and I work together at CVS. The podcast itself really centers on a very simple concept, and that is that people that a business leader only has one place that they can actually place their chips, and that's on their people, because that's the only real place where they can create growth. We talk about all the other places, your finance, your all the other stuff. Those aren't really the areas that will allow you true growth. True growth actually comes from the quality and the way that you invest in and develop and lead your people. And so that the whole idea is that running your business with people is that people are your biggest investment, your most important investment. And we want to take leaders from the industry, CEOs from Fortune 100, Fortune 10, Fortune 5 corporations, uh, entrepreneurs, technologists, uh, thought leaders, subject matter experts, and we bring them onto the podcast so they can share a little bit of insight about how they went about growing their businesses with people. What did they do? What were some of the insights that I've had best-selling author, TEDx speakers, and they all bring a passion with them about ways that they were successful. And I think that mid-market CEOs, CXOs really are finding this interesting because it's experiencing exponential growth right now. So it's really exciting how we're seeing the growth of the podcast and all the people watching it. And my hope is that I will help leaders become better leaders. That's all.
Mm. Yeah, I think certainly since the pandemic, we've seen more and more executives recognizing the importance of their workforce.
Mhm.
That probably labor shortages played a part in that. and it's about time, right?
For sure.
So today, would love to learn from you. I see you've done over 40 episodes, right?
Yes.
Um, 5 key pillars that you could organize your learnings around on how our audience, healthcare, talent acquisition, HR, can be better leaders and lead successful teams. So I'd love for you to introduce us to the 5 pillars, and then we'll investigate each one a little bit closer.
Well, let me begin with the fact that the framework that I have is I'm going to share with all of you at the end of this a few reference materials that you can go to that while they don't mention the pillars themselves exclusively as pillars, they certainly reinforce all of the elements within them in one way, shape, or form. The first off is resonate with the purpose. So your first pillar has to be, if you're part of an organization or you're building an organization, you're running one from scratch yourself, you have to resonate with the purpose. Now, if you're the founder, CEO, like if you don't resonate with the purpose, how can you expect anybody else to, right? Of course, that's like rule number one. But even if you join an organization, like if you can't resonate with the purpose, don't join. The second one is reflect your values. You should be looking for organizations and companies that reflect your values and that you can feel comfortable within the values, not the ones posted on the wall, but the ones that were really within the heart of the organization. The next one, the third pillar, identify is what I call the love pillar. Love the people, appreciate the work, and celebrate both wins and losses as learnings. So it's really, those are 3 distinct things that we'll unpack, is that you really need to do those 3 differently, but in that order. Start by loving the people, move quickly to appreciating the work, and then make sure that you celebrate both the wins and the losses as learnings. The fourth is respect your team by spending time preparing. All too many inspirational leaders spend a lot of time being inspirational. They want to inspire, they want to motivate, and that's all well and good. The best leaders spend time preparing, and they prepare. There was an old commercial that it showed is a Cadillac commercial, and it showed the Cadillac getting there before anybody else, and it left after everybody else. Good leaders, I hate to tell you this, you're not going to like to hear it. You should be getting in before your folks and leaving after your folks, because you have stuff that you're going to be doing during the day, and you should be using all your extra available time to be thinking about how do you lead better? How do you do better? How do you manage and create a better environment and culture for your team? And we'll focus on some of those things. And then the last is, now this might be unusual, probably the first time some of you may have heard it, unless you're familiar with Hebrew, is Lev Shemeh, or a listening heart. And this is saying, as a leader, one of your number one jobs is to be a good listener. And when I say listener, that means listening to not just the people you surround yourself with, but listening to all of your organization so that you can gain insights and perspective. Whenever they bring data and that contradicts what you hear from your team, you can start asking intelligent questions like, I wonder, how does that reconcile with the information that I'm getting over here from people that I'm talking to? Interesting enough, sometimes maybe the data is faulty, or maybe it's how you're interpreting the data that was faulty. So it's that perspective that allows you to be more successful, but it gives jet fuel to your team. Every person you talk to and spend time listening to, they feel just a little bit more inspired, a little bit better about their job, right? And what leader couldn't use a team that's just a little bit more engaged and a little bit more inspired and a little bit more on fire for what they believe in? What leader would say no to that? They wouldn't. You wouldn't. But you got to invest. If you don't give of yourself, you're not going to get anything. So lev shomea, or lev shomea, depending on how you different people pronounce it different ways. But that's the Hebrew word. So happy to unpack any one of those. Would you like me to kind of take it from the top?
Yeah, let's take it from the top. Resonating with the purpose. I know in healthcare, a lot of organizations rally around their service of care and how they're improving health outcomes in the population. So, be great to hear how our listeners could engage that, and particularly, I saw that you were VP of talent acquisition at CVS. Particularly, connect with the purpose of the organization for improving health outcomes.
Yeah. So let's just be frank. I literally just got off the phone with one of my clients, right? I'm a consultant now, and they're a large healthcare organization. And we're just talking about data definitions. Funny enough, right? Of all the things that you're like, big thinking, high level. No, actually, we're getting into the weeds on absolutely the definition of certain terms and how you extrapolate it from data. But I said, at the beginning of the call, I said, remember, the whole purpose of this is for us to be able to get enough of these types of people within the organization, grow our organization with these types of people, these kind of healthcare workers, so that our patient care and our patient outcomes continues to improve, which is actually the mission. It's the purpose of what we are doing here. So let's remember why we're here. Even though we're talking about data definitions, let's remind ourselves why we're here. Doing that periodically throughout meetings and throughout your organization, reminding people to help center them on what is the purpose, not just the purpose of the meeting, but what is your longer, your bigger purpose, allows them to make better decisions and allows you to make better decisions. And it also creates a focal point to allow people to keep from kind of shooting off left, right, and center with things that really don't tie into what you're trying to achieve together. And it's really important. You got to know your purpose. You got to be committed to it, and you have to feel it inside. You got to feel inside your heart, say, this is something that I really want to achieve. Because when you do, then you can share it with others. And it's authentic whenever you're talking about it. If you're sharing a purpose that you don't resonate with, that comes off and is inauthentic. No leader, unless you're a terribly good liar, which I am a terrible liar. My kids tell me all the time. They said, you're like the worst liar in the whole wide world, Dad. But unless you're a great liar, then you cannot, be able to talk about a purpose, get people behind it that you don't believe in. So that is why we need to resonate with the purpose. The next one is reflecting your values. And this is really important here. Decisions should be made with values first. Understand the value tree that your organization is based on. Your whether you call them first principles, whether you call them values, whatever you call them. And then evaluate your decisions based on them. Similar to purpose, they're used as a sifter to understand what is a good decision versus what is a poor decision. It also allows people who have what you want in your team is diversity of thought. That's important. Diversity is huge. You want racial diversity. You want ability diversity. You want people from different socioeconomic perspectives. That's important. But if all of those people are just left free to go wherever, there's no way to pull them together to a focal point. Purpose and values is the focal point that allows them to work together toward a common place. People with diverse perspectives being able to unify and create power into the structure. And that's where the decision making comes from. If you're not reinforcing what the values are and reminding your team and using them yourself in the decision making tree, if you're not modeling the behavior, then your team's probably not going to model it. But if you model it and you encourage them to model it, then the likelihood is that over time, decisions become more consistent. The agreement with the final decision, even if we argue about how to get there, we all agree that we can support this decision. So there's a support, even if there's disagreement amongst the masses about the how. And that creates unity, because organizations need unification, especially with as much diversity as we want to be able to bring in to drive it. So those are the first two. I put those two as first two because I always said that my recruiters needed to evaluate the candidates to see if they resonated with the purpose and they reflect the values before they determine if they're qualified. Why bother going through all sorts of other assessments if they don't meet those two criteria? They're not going to be happy, and you're not going to be happy, and you shouldn't be happy, right? Those things need to align first. Does that make sense, Adam?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I do that as well with interviewing potential employees or partners. And even if they just launch into talking about themselves before you get the chance to mention that this is the agenda, that shows that they're not seeking the purpose. And I think the best applicant is someone that is curious to know what your values and purpose are, so they can align with it. And that's important for them too. I would love to know if you have any examples from people you've interviewed or people you've worked with who've kind of exemplified the first two.
So CVS is a great one. It's just as I was coming on board. So it wasn't my personal example, but it's one that I tell the story of frequently. They had to decide whether to stop smoking or not, meaning get rid of cigarettes out of CVS. That was a $2 billion, billion dollar revenue stream, cigarettes. We also were transforming into a healthcare company. We had the PBM, the Pharmacy Benefit Management. We had Minute Clinics serving healthcare. We wanted our pharmacies, obviously. We wanted to be a healthcare company, and our customers, when we were selling into the customers, were like, "That's all well and good, but how are you a healthcare company selling cigarettes? One of the few items on this world that is not even good for you in small quantities, right? There's no health benefit. It's all negative health benefit that comes from it." And the executives and the board really struggled with this for a little while, because they were like, "We want to get out, but it's not a decision you take lightly to wipe up $2 billion off the board, right?" Most companies don't ever see 2B, right? And we're deciding not to be. That is the question. Right? But so the question and then our CFO and others started, Helena Folks and Lisa Bisaccia and Larry Merlot, started to really get passionate about this. Like, why are we selling cigarettes? Like, and they built out a business case that said, we're going to lose it, but we're going to have to, we have to. It's a values-based thing. And yes, we're going to lose $2 billion. And there's no guarantee that we're going to make it up anywhere else. And we're going to have to take the hit, because if we're going to be a values-driven organization, we got to live to our values. And that means wiping $2 billion off the board. They did it. The board got behind it. It was a long conversation. There's a lot of things that I wasn't a part of, but they did it. They walked away, and then they put together a campaign, and it was called the Kick Butts campaign. They showed big cigarettes being crushed outside of CVS, and there was an execution that said not a single package of cigarettes will be on the store on the day that we launch. So all will be. So just to put in perspective, there's nearly 10,000 CVS stores. That level of, making sure that there's not even one that sells one cigarette to anybody is a monumental feat. But they did it. And do you know what the payoff was that they didn't understand? They hoped, but they couldn't be guaranteed. All of their customers, while the stock plummeted temporarily, all the customers started saying, we support you. Our retail customers, our retail numbers went up. Our pharmacy benefit management customers said, we now believe you're a healthcare company. We want to do business with you. And we more than made up the $2 billion, many, many times over. But there was no guarantee and absolutely no evidence that any of that would take place whenever they made the decision. They made the decision on faith that it was the right thing to do to be able to live their values. And they got rewarded for it because other people realized that they were living their values and they respected them as business people, that they could, what do you know? What do we know about business people, right? You do business with people you know, you like, and you trust. That third one is important. They now trusted us to say, this is a good organization and we trust that they're living their values. And that's how it plays out in both in the back room as well as actually out there in the press later on. Not all of them work out so pleasantly. I'll just say, not all of them are that easy, but that one did, and I think that helps reinforce for you as a leader why you need to live according to your values and why you need to join organizations that reflect them and that you resonate with their purpose. Does that help?
Yeah, and I love that there was growth after it, even in ways that were unexpected, but the commitment was made. We're doing this for our values, and that's a great example because often the drive is to make more money, but we don't see over the hill and understand that can be a byproduct of staying true to your audience and staying true to your brand. So I think everyone listening will find that really useful. Thank you.
No, that's great. So the third pillar for me was talking about, it's what I call the love pillar. Not the Love Shack. That's a song, and I have nothing to do with it. This is the love pillar. So it's totally different.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightclub.
Yes, it's not a nightclub. It's starting with love of your people. Love the people, and that means, and love is an action. That means doing something for people to show them that you care, right? Show them that you are invested in them. Show them that your mind, your heart, you are thinking about them, and you are putting them first before yourself, right? As leaders, sometimes we're narcissists. Sometimes we start putting ourselves first. Listen, I'm going to tell you, I'll admit I've done it. I put myself first. Not proud of it, but I have. We have to constantly be reassessing when the pressure's on. How are we really putting our people first? Are we really putting our teams first? Are we really putting those people ahead of our own needs? That's where it starts. The love the people. The second part is appreciate the work. And what I tell people, I say, I never, I'll say rarely to never. I don't know if never is the word. I rarely to never congratulate somebody on a win. I recognize the effort that they put in that led them to whatever outcome that they're happy to be celebrating. It's really important. Recognize the work that it took. You can't replicate the win always. You don't always get a W at the end of a project. Not every I have a lot of W's in my closet, in my showcase, but I also have probably way more L's in there than I do W's, right? And so, but I do know that the work that I got, that effort, that being appreciated means a lot more to me. You know, a boss that says to me, "Hey, Jeff, I know you've been working really late hours on that spreadsheet, or you've been really you have actually set aside so much extra time to work on talent management and talent development. And I'm seeing the growth of your team as a result of the work that you're putting in. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and what all you're doing? Help me understand that a little bit better." Like, the warm feeling inside comes immediate. You're like, "Oh, this person actually gets me."
Hmm.
Getting into that is super important. Then the third is celebrating both wins and losses on that love pillar. Because I'll tell you, I think we're getting a little noise in the background. It's weird, but yeah. So the celebrating wins and losses is super important because you celebrate them as learnings, not as W's or L's. Everybody loves a win. Everybody loves it. Celebrate it, but also celebrate the losses. I can't tell you how many times somebody came to me with bad news. And I say, "Well, could you repeat it one more time? Help me understand what it was. Just make sure I get it." And they'd tell me what it was. I say, "That's awesome." And they'd be like, "Okay, I know I said it twice, but did you really hear what I just said?" And I said, and after they get to know me, they understand why. I said, "Yeah, look at all you learned. You learned way more than if you'd won." And that learning will propel us into the future. While it didn't give us a success today, that learning that you get from that loss will give us so many more W's down the road that I'll take that loss. The only ones that I don't like is when people do the same thing over and over and don't learn from their losses or their wins.
Hmm.
And that's why I just say, I don't know why you choose not to, or why I choose not to. Sometimes I'm just being hard-headed. I believe too much in my own idea to want to give it up. And so celebrating the wins and losses frees people up to say, I can actually detach from this. This was an idea and it didn't work. I can accept the new idea and do something different next time. So the fourth one is really talking about respecting your team by spending time preparing. And I'm going to say this really succinctly and very clearly, and I'm going to let it go. To be a good manager and a good leader, it means that you need to prep for meetings, read the stuff ahead of time, get prepared ahead of the time of the meeting. Don't overschedule yourself so you are running from one thing to the next. Prepare. Second, do the reading ahead of time for anything that you have. Any pre-reads, do it. Read it twice to 3 times if you have the time. Third, invest in your one-on-ones with your staff, with your extended team. Invest in them. Don't cancel them. If they cancel them, then make them reschedule it. Invest in your one-on-ones as though they are platinum, that they're more valuable than gold. Develop your own competencies in leadership through reading and coursework and classes, as well as communication and influence skills. Take the time to develop yourself. They say put on your own mask before you can help others. If you're not developing your own leadership and communication influence skills, nobody's going to develop them for you, and your team is going to suffer. And lastly, spend time thinking about ways to invest in your team. Spend that time. So my team, my leadership team and TA, we started with once a year talent reviews. We didn't even have talent reviews when I first came. I said, nope, we got to do talent reviews at least once a year. First year we did it. They said, we love this. This is really good. Can we do one at the halfway point? I said, yeah, let's do one at the halfway. So we did a 6-month and a 12-month. We said, that is so good. Let's do it quarterly. I was like, well, yeah, that's a lot of work, but let's do it quarterly. Yeah, our team's growing. Let's do it. So once a quarter, we do a talent review, full stage, like 1.5 days. Leadership, just talking about how do we develop talent? What is performance? Who needs a new assignment? How do we swap talent? How do we rotate? What is the diversity of our leadership? How do we get more diversity? How do we give people how do we affiliate the most important projects that have the biggest learning with the people who need that learning? spending time just talking about it. Well, our team, they got to the point where they're asking me to do it once a month. I said, no. I can't do once a month. But how about, maybe once every 2 months? Can we do on 6 times a year? Like, I don't know anybody else who's doing it. And then we split it up a little bit. Like, we did different topics for each of the 6 ones. So we didn't do a full 2 days session. We do like a 1-day session, right? And then we do bigger at the midpoint. But the fact was, they wanted to invest. They got the bug. They got the internal desire to say, wow, this works. When you start investing in your people, they start doing things that surprise you, and you start performing at a level that you can't even imagine. And so all they want to do is just invest more. Like, they couldn't, we could not over invest in our people. And that was exciting. And we did we shut down recruiting for 3 whole days for everybody to go through this massive training and development session for 3 days online. And we got a 99 NPS on it from our team. 99. There were 0 dissenters, and only 1% were like, yeah, those are right. Somewhere between a 7 and an 8, a 6 and an 8.
There's always someone. Yeah.
Right. Which is fine. I mean, there's probably a couple, right, in total. Out of a few hundred people, I'll take it. And that's like, once you get the bug and you realize just like how much of a multiplier effect it is, pouring yourself and investing in people creates this thing that you can't even imagine, like how it would unpack and unfold. You will never go back because you couldn't if you wanted to. It's just understanding how to invest in people. Okay. And then the last one, and this one is the interesting one. It's called Lev Shemay, a listening heart. And I'll tell you this, Solomon, who's in the Bible, is considered to be the wisest person on earth, right? He asked for something. Everybody says the wisdom of Solomon. He asked for wisdom. He didn't ask for wisdom. If you look in the Hebrew, it actually says that he asked for Lev Shemay, a listening heart. Now, in the Bible, it says God gave him these other things, wisdom and riches and wealth and lands and, success, but in part because he asked for a listening heart. What is the biggest way that you can show somebody that you love them or that you care or are interested?
I would say by listening to them.
If you're listening to them, they certainly feel cared for. That's exactly it. That's the beginning. So what I tell folks is I say, give yourself unstructured time throughout your day, throughout your week, that you protect, to go off and have unstructured conversations with your team. You can also do structured to some extent, like, skip level meetings and all that. That's great. Perfect. I don't disagree. That's listening as well. But also put in some unstructured conversations and talk to people who are outside of your circle of influence. Like, if you have a leadership team, like, it's okay, pop in on them, but you're more likely to pop in on them anyhow, right? Pop in on them, but try to pop in 2 or 3 levels below them. Pop in on somebody who you maybe is a new person in your organization. So, oh, hey, Joe, I heard that you just joined. Just send them a quick email. Do you have 5 minutes to talk today? They'll be scared to death that the VP or the SVP or EVP or CEO is contacting them until they realize that actually you're just a friendly voice. Hey, I just wanted to see how you're doing. You just want to see how I was doing? Yeah. I just want to welcome you to the company. Like, I'm so glad you're here. Like, I've heard some good stuff about you. I don't know a whole lot about you, but I'd like to learn more. And then over time, you talk to them. They become a friendly voice and a friendly face. And then before long, they start telling you stuff about your own organization. They say, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I noticed this. I'm like, why would I get anybody in trouble? Well, we don't get people in trouble. We attack problems, not people. Nobody gets in trouble over anything. I mean, unless they're stealing from the company, if they're doing stuff that is completely unethical, in violation of trust, then you get in trouble. But in my career, I've had to deal with a handful of those, right? My whole career, 30 years, handful. If I based my whole career based on that, then I would be completely misaligned. Identify with the 99.9% of my day, which is dealing with people with good intentions who may or may not be misdirected. That's it. And so you get this insight, and then all of a sudden you get data. You might get data over here and an insight over here, and you ask your team, say, what does this mean? The data is different from what I'm hearing out in the field. And then they can say, well, it's interesting because I actually heard that same thing out in the field, and we're not sure. I don't know that I know what that means either. Sometimes we don't have the answer in the meeting. It's willingness to say, we're not going to draw conclusions just from data that's sitting up on a screen. We're now going to go out and investigate and try and understand and reconcile what that means so that we can actually make a better decision. It's really making decisions in context with data as well as subjective information that allows leaders to be successful. It's not just being data driven. I hate whenever I hear, oh, I'm a data driven person. Well, that's great. I mean, then AI will be able to do your job in no time soon. Because data driven means that all you're doing is following the data, and anybody can follow the data. Being data oriented means that I understand and I appreciate data, and I want to understand it in the context of the subjective understanding of what I'm experiencing, and I put those two together to be able to create amazing decisions that otherwise cannot be created. It's the creative side of leadership, and that's the fun part. So Lave Chamay gives you the ability to be creative as a leader and to have special insights. And no leader would want to throw that. Those are some of the most valuable tidbits that a leader can get. Was that helpful to kind of unpack those 5?
Yeah. And I love how much of it challenges conventional wisdom. I think it's terrible how if someone gets an email from their CEO asking to speak, they feel like running a mile and they're afraid. Or I know people working in corporations and they're scared to stick their neck out and get it wrong and make errors. But all that stuff is productive for the organization, and I think the working culture in a lot of organizations has got it wrong. Intimidation rules.
I had a story. I was in Rolls-Royce a few years back, and we had this terrible situation where literally 30% of our offer letters were accurate whenever I took over. They were called T's and C's, the terms and conditions, and each offer was up to an inch thick. And they'd had 6 sets of consultants from the biggest names to the littlest boutiques working on this, and nobody could crack the problem. And so I took over and I was working this problem and I'm not going to tell you about how we solved it and all that. That's a whole different story. But we were in the middle of the problem, and the coordinators, God love them, they were trying to build out these T's and C's for a ramping up hiring. And you can imagine how difficult it is to create one offer letter that is this thick whenever you're hiring by the thousands, right? And they were literally, the options were 140 across by a couple hundred down, a grid that they had to pick and choose from to be able to build up a single offer. So I was walking through Jubilee House, and that's in Derby, England, where we had our TA shared service, our recruiting shared service, and I walked up to one of my coordinators, and it was an open floor plan. I just came out and say, "Hey there." She jumped up. She goes, and then she goes, "Oh, it's just you, Jeff. I'm so glad." And that was the biggest compliment that I think I've ever been paid before or since as a leader. It's just you, Jeff. Because that meant to me that she felt safe with me. She could be herself around me. She didn't feel like I was going to judge her. She felt like she was good enough and that she was appreciated for what she did. And at that moment in time, I realized just that was what I needed to create in all my teams everywhere it's just you, Jeff. Good. I'm glad. We can talk. And that is the essence of what I'm talk about here is it's just you, Jeff kind of concept.
Yeah.
Now, over time, we fixed those problems. It wasn't easy, and there was a lot of difficulty, but part of it was because the coordinators were willing to be honest with us because they weren't hiding things for fear of retribution. They're willing to share.
Yeah.
And it's partially the culture. You will unlock a lot of things whenever you create a culture that whenever you walk up to your people and say, oh, it's just you, Jan. It's just you, Debbie. It's just you, Dave. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to see you. Yeah. And the first contact sometimes is a little bit intimidating. But once they get to know who you are, I still remember in CVS, one of the questions that somebody go, is this guy for real? is this an act or is this the way he really is? Right. And they found out soon enough that this is exactly who I am. Yeah. And I'm not asking you as leaders to be who I am, be who you are, but understand within the context of those 5 different pillars, you can adopt and adapt your style within that to be very successful ultimately. Does that help?
That sigh of relief. Yeah, that's very helpful. So, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. If anybody would like to follow up with you or learn a little bit more about yourself, where can they find you?
So, first of all, go to on LinkedIn. You can find me on Growing Your Business with People. You can also find me on the web at www.gywbp.com or growingyourbusinesswithpeople.com. Both of them are under mine. And you could email me at jeff@jkladvisors.ai. So, any way that you want to follow up with me. And then please, if you don't mind, go to my podcast, check it out. We have some tremendous people that I think that any leader would get a lot out of, and we have a huge growing community of people who are sharing their comments. We're on season 4, and we just kicked off with Matt Domo, who is actually the founder of Amazon Web Services, so co-founder of Amazon Web Services. So we got some pretty interesting people for you to get to know.
Yeah, that'll be good. I'm going to listen to that one for sure. Well, yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Feel free to check out Jeff's podcast, and you, of course, can subscribe to ours. Follow me on LinkedIn, Adam Chambers, for more content on nurse recruitment secrets. And we'll be working to bring you more insight and analysis in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for coming on, Jeff.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate the time.
Okay. See you later. Bye.